a tiny point here, periods always go inside the quotation marks. So if you do this throughout the paper, make sure you proofread to change all of them. One of the things you have here is your thesis, and so you have here, this is your introductory paragraph, which of course you'll have to fix that first sentence. So which works fine. You'll need an abstract, which summarizes the whole paper, and then you have your thesis. So I can see sort of this functioning as your thesis. You definitely want to be careful is having the thesis where it's so broad, where the Winchester rifle, it changed everything, and that's your thesis pretty much. So one thing you can do to make it more specific is talking about a superior technology, is go ahead and be specific about that what you mean by that superior technology. So qualify your term here, and then you could finish off the sentence. It doesn't have to be one sentence. It can be more than one, where you talk about its impact. And then we would continue with the rest of the paper. Make sure that all your headings are not underlined, and they need to be centered. One of the things here that you can kind of bring into your point is about the need from a military perspective to have this longer range rifle that's faster. And one thing you can sort of demonstrate is what it was like before. So even if you don't have all the specifics and the facts, but you can just imagine, having to be closer to your enemy and the kind of devastation that would occur from that, and also being out in the battlefield and not being able to reload your weapon faster. So kind of like speculate what are the possible harm, what is the possible harm to having just a Colt revolver. So I really like how you sort of trying to build up that context, and this is where you can bring in your sources, and how Edgerton talked about the particular significance. What was significant about this was the fact they needed something in military combat, because I'm assuming there was a lot of lives that ended because of the previous machinery that was used. So this is where you can bring in those sources and make the connection between history and some of these concepts. And also, some things you can bring into effect was, the cost. I don't know if you talk about that later, but the cost of the Winchester, making this longer and ranged and faster rifle. So I'm just kind of like trying to bring in, some of the information that we've learned. So helping you tie it in, because you will have to tie in those sources to your paper. It can't just be a history report. You have to analyze this history yourself. This is definitely a lot better. You labeled your images. One thing though, you have to italicize the word figure, and then you need the period, and then you have picture of a toggle link. So you'll have to do the same for the other one. I'm a little lost here. You're talking about the Springfield rifle. I thought you said before it was the Colt revolver that the military was using. So be clear. Maybe you can describe in a paragraph the kind of arsenal or the kind of equipment that it was commonly found in the military at that time in the 19th century. And then you can so then this would make sense. Otherwise, I'm like, well, where did this thing come from? I thought it was the Colt revolver. Excuse me. So this is great. I like how you try to bring in tenor. It would definitely be more appropriate if you moved it right after you mentioned revenge effect. So then it attributes that to tenor. You can even, make it more clear for the reader, you can even put the quotation marks right after the phrase. Then for certain, you've communicated tenor had stated that. And then this would be unnecessary then. One thing I'm curious about are were the revenge effects of this rifle. I mean, I can imagine now that you have something that's longer range and also that is faster to load, what kind of accidents occurred as a result. I mean, it's impossible that there weren't any accidents, because there is a learning curve with any new technology. So that would be relevant. Even with the longer range, you are more likely to accidentally kill the wrong person. that may have changed also warfare in itself. I mean, this is where you can bring in Postman, where it kind of changes the whole game. And, maybe it was more important to distinguish yourself from your enemy, because from afar, a moving target, you can get hit. And so maybe different colors were very important. So you really have to kind of like think outside the box. It's like, how did this change military combat? So one of the things that you're really losing me here is that you're kind of assuming that the reader already knows all these guns. You really need a paragraph after your introduction where you're going to explain all these different guns that you are then going to talk about in the rest of the paper. Talk about the flintlock style gun, the Colt revolver, the Springfield, and then you can end with the Winchester. So you're sort of defining your terms here. So you're just kind of using these things all very loosely. And again, you know what? I keep getting this thing. I apologize. It's like, go away. Anyways, so that's really important. Otherwise, it really feels like I can take any one of these sections, move them around in the paper, and it would read the same way. And the writing shouldn't flow like that. Everything should kind of have this rhyme and reason to it. The generic formula for this paper is pretty much history, present, future. I mean, that's kind of like at its most general. And then, of course, people kind of take what they want from that and go into its technological or social impact and develop the context, things like that. So that's where it gets a little more complicated. But right now, yours is kind of random. It's sort of like, I can see some historical progression, but I'm just kind of getting lost with all these different guns. I'm not too familiar with it. So that needs to be explained early on. One of the things that common error, I guess you say, that most students did in their writing was just to say, voila, it's an American symbol. Voila, everybody had it. But how did it get there? Like, how did it become an American symbol? How did it become sort of synonymous with the cowboy? I mean, it was used by the military. So how did it get from the battlefield to now the cowboys' hands riding on horses and, gathering up the cows? How did that happen? So it's common just to like jump and just, we'll fill in the blank. But what is that blank? And so that's very unclear. So definitely you'll need to explain that a little bit better, providing that context. I know this was an option for a lot of people's topics. I don't think this works with yours, talking about the negative impacts of guns. Because now, first you went with Winchester, and then now you're just going really broad. I mean, we know the negative impacts. It can kill people. And then we're like, no, people kill people. Regardless, you can't kill someone by throwing a spoon at somebody. But if you throw a bullet at someone at, God knows how fast, that could kill somebody. So the negative impact doesn't really work with this paper. So it's sort of obvious. I think what definitely would be more interesting, because this is more of a historical paper, is how the Winchester technology impacted other guns, or you can even keep it primarily in the history. You're the only student who's doing a history, so your whole paper is based on stuff that occurred in the past. So this section really, talking about this negative impact wouldn't be as relevant. So, I mean, this works well here when you talk about Oliver Winchester, but you never really talked about, his industry and how that just took off, and, and how this guy became this, like, multi-millionaire. And that was kind of disregarded altogether. I think the key is in this section here, how it went from just being used by the military, which is a small percentage of the American population, to now, being produced to be an American symbol. So that's kind of like where the key lies, is explaining that. How did that happen? And Winchester himself comes into play, and then, making a lot of money. You know, oftentimes something that's popular is only popular because someone was able to market it really well. Is that what Oliver Winchester did? It was just, you know, savvy marketing. You know, that's how Bill Gates has pretty much sold all his PCs. So it's not a superior system over a Mac. It's just really, really good marketing. So that's something you really have to sort of bring in. It's okay if you keep it in the history. That would be fine. So do a little bit more research for this paper. Otherwise, really interesting topic. Let me see. References looks good. Again, you know, with altering our perceptions, you can keep it sort of in the past when, you know, it was introduced to the military. How did it change military combat? So that's when you bring in the perception part and how it changed the whole game of fighting. Like again, like, yeah, you can shoot at farther distances, but then you can also make more mistakes as well, and that's where you get revenge effects. So bring that into play. And other things is that when all of a sudden these cowboys now, you know, that changed our perception of not only, you know, of owning guns, but it changed the American image to the rest of the world. So oftentimes American symbol like McDonald's, KFC, those kind of symbols really puts a stamp on how we are viewed in the rest of the world. So I mean, that's kind of a maybe a nice conclusive paragraph, you know, what the Winchester did, you know, of this American symbol, and how we are perceived at this gun-bearing society. People are scared to death to come to America because they think they're going to be raped and shot in the head. So, and we do have the worst gun record in the world. So that's something I guess is a nice ending. But so anyway, there's some options as well.